The sound of tires skidding on wet asphalt cut through the stillness of the night as Sam, her helmet still strapped under her chin, pulled up beside the small three-story building. The acrid smell of smoke hit her nostrils before she could even process the scene unfolding before her eyes. A dark cloud escaped from a second-floor window, carrying muffled screams that turned the cold night into a suffocating heat of despair. "Help! Someone help me!" The shrill voice of a child broke through the barrier of the cracked glass, echoing like an alarm in Sam's chest. Without hesitation, she dropped her delivery bag and sprinted toward the building's entrance. Every step felt like a definitive choice, every heartbeat a reminder that there was no time to waste. The door was unlocked, but the hallway was already filling with smoke. Sam pulled her jacket over her mouth and nose, trying to filter the air as she climbed the narrow staircase. The heat intensified with each step, the smoke turning everything into blurred shadows. On the second floor, she spotted the door where the cries were coming from. It was ajar, letting out a flickering light that danced on the walls like a warning of imminent danger. "Hey, I'm here to help," Sam shouted, pushing the door open with her shoulder. The room was engulfed in suffocating chaos, overturned furniture, sparks flying from a burned-out socket, and flaming curtains spewing fire in unpredictable directions. In the farthest corner, a girl about 6 years old was huddled, her wide eyes reflecting panic. "Come with me, it's going to be okay." Sam crouched, extending her arms. The child hesitated for a moment before running toward her, sobbing. Holding her tightly, Sam turned back, but the path was already blocked by flames licking at the door. The heat seemed to melt the air around her, but she couldn't give in to fear. Her eyes scanned the room, landing on the window as the only escape route. "Close your eyes and hold on tight to me, okay?" Sam's voice was firm but gentle. She pulled her jacket around the child to shield her from the shattered glass, and with a decisive motion, kicked the window open. The sound of breaking glass mingled with the crackling flames as Sam calculated the distance to the ground. It was a risky jump, but the only option. She positioned herself on the windowsill, feeling the cold wind hit her face, a brutal contrast to the unbearable heat of the fire. Clutching the girl as if her own life depended on it, Sam jumped. The impact was harsh, her knees buckling to absorb the fall. She felt a sharp pain in her ankle, but didn't care. The child's cries in her arms were proof she had succeeded. A crowd had already gathered outside, drawn by the smoke and flames now consuming the building. For a moment, there was a surreal silence, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Then applause erupted, blending with the distant wail of fire truck sirens finally arriving. Sam, still kneeling on the asphalt, felt a wave of emotions she couldn't name. "You saved my daughter." The child's mother's voice trembled with gratitude as she knelt beside Sam. "I don't know how to thank you." Sam simply shook her head, her eyes fixed on the burning building. Something inside her had shifted that night. The fire wasn't just an enemy to be fought, but a calling, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was a chance to save lives. When the firefighters arrived to extinguish the blaze, one of them, a woman with a commanding presence and sharp eyes, stopped beside Sam. "That was incredible. You've got guts, kid," she said before joining her team. Sam stayed there a few minutes longer, watching the flames die down and feeling the weight of what had just happened. The crowd still murmured praises and words of encouragement, but to her, this wasn't heroism. It was just the beginning of something she didn't fully understand yet. As the ambulance tended to her injured leg and the child was taken for a checkup, Sam realized this wouldn't just be another ordinary day in her life. Fate had placed a challenge before her, and for the first time, she felt there might be a different path waiting to be walked. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of Sam's small apartment, casting a golden light over the modest furniture. The events of the previous night felt like a distant dream, yet the ache in her ankle served as a stark reminder that it was all too real. She sat at her kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, her thoughts a jumble of emotions. Could she have done things differently? Was it luck or instinct that drove her into that burning building? A sharp knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Sam limped over, wincing slightly, and opened it to find a woman standing there. Her face was familiar, yet transformed by emotion. It was the mother of the little girl Sam had saved. "Hi, I hope I'm not disturbing you," the woman began, clutching a small bag in her hands. "I just wanted to thank you properly for what you did. You saved my daughter's life." Sam's eyes softened as she stepped aside to let her in. "Please, come in. You don't have to thank me. I just did what anyone would have done." The woman stepped inside hesitant, looking around the cozy apartment. "Not everyone would have risked their life like you did," she said, her voice trembling. She placed the bag on the table. "I brought some things for you. It's not much, but it's a small token of our gratitude." Sam glanced at the bag, which contained homemade food and a few items wrapped in cloth. She smiled warmly. "This means a lot, really. But how is your daughter? Is she okay?" "She's doing well," the woman replied, her face lighting up with relief. "She's still a little shaken, of course, but she's safe thanks to you. And she hasn't stopped talking about the brave lady who saved her." Sam chuckled softly, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I'm glad she's okay. That's all that matters." The woman hesitated for a moment before pulling a small card from her pocket. "I also wanted to give you this. It's the card of Commander Harris from the local fire station. She asked me to pass it along to you. She said she'd like to meet you." Sam took the card, her brow furrowing slightly as she read the neatly printed name and title. "Commander Harris? Yes. She was there last night and saw what you did. She said you have the instincts of a firefighter," the woman said with a faint smile. "She thought you might be interested in visiting the station, maybe seeing what it's all about." Sam let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "Me? A firefighter? That's not something I ever imagined." "Maybe not," the woman replied gently. "But sometimes life has a way of showing us paths we never expected." The words lingered in the air as Sam stared at the card. She couldn't deny the faint flicker of curiosity that sparked in her chest. The events of the night before had awakened something within her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. "Thank you for this," Sam finally said, slipping the card into her pocket. "I'll think about it." The woman nodded, a look of understanding in her eyes. "Whatever you decide, just know that you've already made a difference. Not just for me and my daughter, but for everyone who saw what you did after the woman left." Sam sat back down at the table, the card resting in front of her. She traced the edges with her finger, lost in thought. Could this really be a new beginning? Or was it just a fleeting moment, a brief detour from her ordinary life? She glanced at the clock, her coffee now cold. For the first time in a long time, Sam felt a strange sense of anticipation, as though the world was nudging her toward something greater. And while the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. Last night had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. The community center buzzed with life that evening, its main hall filled with folding chairs arranged in neat rows and strings of colorful lights draped across the ceiling. Sam hesitated at the entrance, her worn sneakers squeaking slightly against the polished floor. She wasn't used to this kind of attention, and the idea of being celebrated for what she considered a simple act of humanity felt overwhelming. "Sam, over here." A familiar voice called her name, and she turned to see Mrs. Jenkins, a kind elderly neighbor, waving enthusiastically from the front row. Next to her, children from the neighborhood bounced excitedly in their seats, whispering among themselves. Word of her heroism had spread quickly, and Sam's name was now whispered with admiration throughout the tight-knit community. Sam adjusted her jacket and stepped inside, her heart pounding. The smell of home-cooked food filled the air, mingling with the chatter of friends and neighbors. She caught snippets of conversations as she walked past. "That's the girl who saved the child," and "Can you believe the bravery?" Their words wrapping around her like a mixture of warmth and weight. At the front of the room stood a makeshift podium, decorated with fresh flowers and a banner that read, "Thank you, Sam," in bold, colorful letters. As she approached, a woman stepped forward to greet her. Sam recognized her immediately. "Commander Harris." Sam, Harris said, extending a firm hand. Her presence was commanding yet warm, her uniform crisp and spotless. I'm glad you came. You deserve this recognition. Sam shook her hand, unsure how to respond. I don't know about that. I just did what anyone would have done. Harris raised an eyebrow, her expression both amused and impressed. Not everyone would have run into a burning building, especially without any training. That takes guts. And you've got plenty of it. Before Sam could reply, the microphone crackled to life, and the room quieted. An older man with a kind smile, the head of the community center, stepped up to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, tonight we gather to honor someone who has reminded us of the extraordinary strength and compassion that exists within our community. Sam showed incredible courage in saving a young girl's life, and we are here to thank her for her selflessness. The room erupted into applause, and Sam felt her cheeks flush as dozens of eyes turned toward her. She gave a small, awkward wave, wishing she could melt into the floor. The children cheered the loudest, their voices high and jubilant. The speech continued, recounting the events of that fateful night in vivid detail, each word making Sam relive the moments she had spent pushing through the smoke and heat. When the man finished, he gestured for her to come forward. Reluctantly, she approached the podium. I don't know what to say, Sam began, her voice shaky but sincere. Thank you for this, but honestly, I'm not a hero. I just did what I thought was right. That little girl needed help, and I was there. I'm just glad she's okay. The room was silent for a moment before another wave of applause broke out, even louder than before. Harris, standing nearby, nodded approvingly. After the formalities, the evening turned into a celebration. Neighbors approached Sam with hugs and kind words. Children handed her hand-drawn pictures of the scene from their imagination, and someone pressed a plate of homemade cookies into her hands. Despite her initial discomfort, Sam found herself smiling more and feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. Toward the end of the evening, Harris approached her again. Sam, can we talk for a moment? They stepped aside into a quieter corner of the room. Harris's expression was serious now, her tone measured. I wasn't joking earlier. You have the instincts of a firefighter. That's not something you can teach. It's something you're born with. Have you ever thought about joining the force? Sam hesitated, looking down at her hands. I don't know. I mean, last night was intense. I'm not sure if I could do that every day. Harris nodded thoughtfully. That's a fair concern. It's not an easy job, and it's not for everyone. But I see potential in you, Sam. If you're willing, I'd like you to visit the station. No pressure. Just come and see what it's like. Sam glanced around the room, her eyes landing on the smiling faces of her neighbors and the children who looked up to her with wide, admiring eyes. A small spark of curiosity lit within her. Could this be the path she was meant to take? I'll think about it, she said finally. Harris smiled. That's all I ask. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready. As the celebration wound down and Sam made her way home, the weight of the card in her pocket felt heavier than it should. The cheers and kind words of the community replayed in her mind, mingling with Harris's offer. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, could she really become a firefighter? Could this be her purpose? The thought both scared and excited her, and as she climbed into bed that night, she knew one thing for certain: her life was no longer ordinary, and the choices ahead would shape her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The fire station loomed ahead, its bright red doors and pristine brick facade both welcoming and intimidating. Sam paused outside, the faint hum of activity from within making her pulse quicken. The weight of Commander Harris's card in her pocket was nothing compared to the heavier weight of doubt that had settled in her chest. She wasn't sure if she belonged here, but something had drawn her to take the step. You've got this, she murmured to herself, squaring her shoulders before pushing open the door. The smell of rubber, smoke, and coffee hit her immediately, a combination that felt oddly reassuring. Inside, the firehouse was a blend of function and camaraderie. Uniforms hung neatly on racks, polished trucks gleamed under fluorescent lights, and the distant sound of laughter echoed from a break room. Sam barely had time to take it all in before Harris's commanding voice rang out. Sam, right on time, Harris approached with the same air of confidence Sam had seen during the community celebration. She was flanked by two firefighters, a tall, muscular man with graying hair and a kind smile, and a petite woman with sharp eyes and a welcoming demeanor. "Glad you decided to come," Harris said, extending her hand. "Let me introduce you to Rick, one of our veterans, and Emily, one of our newest recruits." Rick gave a firm handshake, his grip strong but warm. "Good to meet you, Sam. Harris has told us about what you did. Takes a lot of guts." Emily grinned, her hand smaller but no less confident. "Welcome to the madhouse. Don't let Rick scare you off. He's all bark, no bite." Sam chuckled nervously, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. Harris gestured for her to follow, leading her deeper into the station. "We're going to give you a little tour, show you what we do here," Harris explained. "No pressure. Just take it all in and see if this feels like something you could see yourself doing." The tour took Sam through the garage, where Rick proudly showed off the fire engines and equipment. He explained the purpose of each tool with the enthusiasm of someone who had spent decades perfecting his craft. Emily chimed in with stories of her training, highlighting both the challenges and the rewards of the job. "It's not just about fighting fires," Emily said. "We're first responders. Medical emergencies, car accidents, you name it. Every day is different, and every call is a chance to make a difference." As they moved to the training area, Harris handed Sam a pair of gloves. "Ready to try something simple?" she asked. Sam hesitated but nodded. "Sure. What do I have to do?" Rick wheeled out a heavy fire hose, its thick coils daunting. "Let's see if you can handle this." "It's harder than it looks," with Emily's guidance. Sam positioned herself, gripping the hose tightly. As water surged through, the force nearly knocked her off balance. She gritted her teeth, digging her heels in as she fought to control the powerful stream. Laughter and cheers erupted from the small audience of firefighters who had gathered to watch. "Not bad for a first-timer," Rick called out, clapping her on the back as she finally let go of the hose, her arms trembling from the effort. Sam couldn't help but laugh, a mix of exhilaration and exhaustion washing over her. She hadn't realized how much she needed this a moment to push herself, to feel capable in a way she hadn't before. Harris stepped forward, her expression approving. "You've got strength, Sam. And more importantly, you've got heart. Those are two things we can't teach. The rest? That's what training is for." As the tour wrapped up, Sam found herself sitting in the break room with Emily, sipping a cup of strong coffee. The walls were covered in photos of the team's smiling faces, moments of triumph, and reminders of the bond they shared. "So, what do you think?" Emily asked, her tone curious but not pushy. Sam stared into her cup, the steam rising in soft curls. "I think I've got a lot to think about. This is all new to me, but it feels important. Like it could be something real." Emily nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "Take your time. It's not a decision to rush. But just so you know, you've got what it takes." We all see it. As Sam left the station that evening, the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. The card Harris had given her felt lighter in her pocket now, no longer a burden, but a possibility. For the first time in a long time, Sam felt like she was standing at the edge of something bigger than herself. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take the leap. The sun hung low in the sky as Sam arrived at the fire station for her first official day of training. Her heart pounded as she stepped through the wide doors, the sounds of clanging metal and distant chatter filling the air. This time, the atmosphere felt different, less of an introduction, more of a challenge. Harris greeted her with a nod, clipboard in hand. "Morning, Sam. Ready to work?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Sam replied, trying to inject confidence into her voice. "Good," Harris said. "We've got a lot to cover today. Follow me." Sam followed Harris into the training yard, where several firefighters were already engaged in drills. She spotted Emily, who gave her a quick wave, and Rick, who was barking instructions at a group struggling with a dummy rescue drill. The sight only added to Sam's nerves. "We'll start with the basics," Harris said. She pointed to a ladder truck parked nearby. "Your first task is to climb to the top. It's not as easy as it looks, especially with all this gear. Sam hesitated but nodded. She donned the heavy jacket and helmet handed to her, the weight immediately unfamiliar. As she approached the ladder, a few firefighters paused to watch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. The climb was grueling. Each rung felt heavier than the last as the gear weighed her down and the height made her palms slick with sweat. By the time she reached the top, her arms burned and her legs felt like jelly. But the view from up there was breathtaking, a clear expanse of the city bathed in morning light. It gave her a moment of clarity before the descent. Back on the ground, Harris clapped her on the shoulder. Not bad for a first try. Let's keep moving. The day unfolded into a series of drills that tested every ounce of Sam's physical and mental strength. She practiced dragging a 150-pound dummy through an obstacle course, learned how to handle the fire hose under extreme pressure, and participated in a simulated fire rescue where thick smoke filled a controlled environment. Each task pushed her closer to her limits. During a break, Sam sat on a bench, gulping down water. Emily joined her, offering a smile. Tough, huh? Sam nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. I didn't realize how much goes into this. It's overwhelming, Emily chuckled. That's how I felt on my first day. But you're doing great. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Sam glanced at a group of firefighters nearby, some of whom seemed to be whispering and casting glances in her direction. She couldn't shake the feeling that not everyone was rooting for her. Harris must have noticed because, during the next drill, she pulled Sam aside. Listen, she said, her tone firm but encouraging. You're going to face doubts from others and from yourself. That's part of the job, but don't let it get to you. You've got what it takes, Sam. I wouldn't have invited you here if I didn't believe that. Sam swallowed hard and nodded. Thanks, Commander. I needed to hear that. The afternoon brought the most challenging exercise yet, a high-pressure scenario simulating a real emergency. Sam was tasked with leading a team to rescue a victim trapped in a collapsed building. The simulation was timed, and every decision counted. As the exercise began, Sam found herself overwhelmed by the noise, the smoke, and the weight of responsibility. Her team looked to her for direction, and for a moment she froze. But then Harris's words echoed in her mind. She took a deep breath and started giving clear, decisive orders. Emily, check the left corridor for structural integrity. Rick, help me move this debris. We need to stabilize this section before we go any further. Piece by piece, the team worked together, and Sam began to feel a rhythm. When they finally reached the victim, a weighted dummy buried under rubble, it was Sam who pulled it free. Adrenaline coursing through her veins. The buzzer signaled the end of the exercise, and Sam collapsed onto the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. Harris approached, a rare smile on her face. You did it, she said. Not perfect, but damn good for a first-timer. You've got the instincts and the drive. The rest will come with time. As Sam left the station that evening, her body ached in ways she didn't know were possible. But beneath the exhaustion was a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. The doubts still lingered, but they were quieter now, drowned out by a growing belief that maybe, just maybe, she had found her place. The fire station was quieter than usual that evening. The hum of activity had subsided, leaving a calm stillness in its place. Sam sat on a bench outside the garage, her muscles still sore from the day's grueling exercises. The sky above her was streaked with fading hues of orange and pink, a tranquil contrast to the intensity of her thoughts. She turned the card over in her hands, a small, worn piece of paper she'd kept since the night Harris had first spoken to her. Something about that conversation had stuck, like a splinter in her mind, and tonight the weight of it was heavier than ever. You look like you've got the world on your shoulders. Harris's voice broke through the quiet. Sam looked up to see the commander leaning against the garage door, her arms crossed and a knowing smile on her face. Just thinking, Sam said, offering a weak smile in return. Seems like I've been doing a lot of that lately. Harris approached and sat down beside her, the bench creaking under their combined weight. It's part of the process, she said. When you're stepping into something new, something big, it's normal to question yourself. Sam nodded, but the words didn't erase the knot in her stomach. "Do you ever wonder if you're strong enough?" she asked. "Not just physically, but everything else. Mentally, emotionally." Harris's expression softened. "All the time," she admitted. "When I first started, there were days I wanted to quit. People doubted me, and I doubted myself. But I learned something important. Strength isn't about never feeling weak. It's about pushing through even when you do." Sam stared at the card in her hand, her thumb tracing the edges. "I guess I'm still figuring that out." Harris tilted her head slightly, studying Sam's face. "You've got a story, don't you?" she asked gently. "Something that's driving you, even if you don't want to admit it." Sam hesitated. For a moment, she considered brushing off the question, but something in Harris's tone told her it was safe to let the walls down. "My dad," she began, her voice quieter now. "He was an electrician, worked long hours, always pushing himself to give me a better life. One day, he got called to fix a faulty wire in this old building. The place wasn't up to code, but he went anyway. There was an electrical fire. He didn't make it out." Harris remained silent, letting the weight of Sam's words hang in the air. "I was young," Sam continued, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "But I remember the aftermath, the grief, the anger. For a long time, I blamed myself. Thought maybe if I'd said something, asked him not to go, he'd still be here. But that's not how life works, is it?" "No, it's not," Harris agreed softly. "But that doesn't mean you have to carry that weight alone." Sam looked at her, searching for understanding. "How do you let it go? The guilt, the fear? How do you keep moving forward?" Harris leaned back, her gaze turning upward to the darkening sky. "You don't let it go," she said after a moment. "You carry it with you, not as a burden, but as a reminder. A fire doesn't just destroy, it also clears the way for new growth. What happened to your dad? It's a tragedy, no doubt about that. But it doesn't have to define you. It can fuel you." Sam's grip on the card tightened as she absorbed Harris's words. "Is that what keeps you going?" she asked. Harris nodded. "I've faced my share of fires, literal and figurative. But every time, I remind myself why I'm here, why I do what I do. And I see that same drive in you, Sam. Even if you don't see it yet." For the first time that evening, Sam felt a flicker of hope pierce through the haze of doubt. Maybe Harris was right. Maybe the fire inside her wasn't just pain. Maybe it was purpose. "Thanks, Commander," she said quietly, "for listening. And for everything else." Harris stood, her authoritative demeanor returning. "Any time. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's another day, and the work doesn't stop." Sam watched her walk back into the station, the door closing softly behind her. She sat alone for a while longer, the card still in her hand. The stars were beginning to emerge, tiny pinpricks of light against the dark canvas of night. As she finally stood and made her way inside, Sam felt lighter somehow. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a spark, and for the first time in a long time, she was ready to let it ignite. The alarm blared through the fire station, a sharp, urgent call that cut through the stillness of the early morning. Sam jolted awake in the bunk room, her heart racing even before her feet hit the ground. She barely had time to grab her gear before joining the others in the garage, where Harris was already issuing instructions. "We've got a structure fire at a warehouse on 5th, Harris said, her voice steady but firm. "Reports say there's someone trapped inside. Let's move." Sam climbed into the truck, her hands gripping the edges of her seat as the engine roared to life. The ride to the scene was a blur of flashing lights and the wail of the siren. Emily sat beside her, her expression a mix of focus and tension. "First big one, huh?" Emily said, glancing at Sam. Sam nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah, first is more than just an observer. You'll be fine," Emily said, her voice confident. "Just stick to what you've learned." When they arrived, the warehouse was already engulfed in flames, thick black smoke billowing into the sky. The heat was oppressive even from a distance, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of burning wood and chemicals. Harris directed the team with precision, dividing them into groups to tackle the blaze and search for the trapped worker. "Sam, "You're with Rick and Emily," Harris said. "Your priority is the rescue. Stay focused. Stay safe." Sam pulled on her mask and followed Rick and Emily toward the building. The moment they entered, the world shifted. The roar of the fire was deafening, and visibility was nearly zero, the thick smoke turning everything into a disorienting gray void. Rick took the lead, his voice steady as he gave instructions. "Sam, stay close. Emily, keep an eye on the structure." Sam's heart pounded as she navigated the chaos. The heat was like a physical force, pressing against her as she moved deeper into the building. Then, over the crackle of the flames, she heard a faint, desperate cry for help. "Over here," she shouted, motioning for Rick and Emily to follow. They found the worker pinned under a collapsed beam, his face pale and covered in soot. He coughed violently, his eyes wide with fear. "We've got you," Sam said, her voice firm but reassuring. Rick assessed the situation quickly. "We need to lift this beam. Emily, stabilize it from that side." "Sam, help me lift." Sam positioned herself beside Rick, gripping the hot, heavy beam with gloved hands. Her muscles screamed in protest as they lifted, but together they managed to free the worker. Emily pulled him to safety, supporting his weight as they began to retreat. Just as they were about to exit, a loud creak echoed through the building. Sam looked up to see part of the ceiling starting to collapse. "Move now," Rick shouted. They ran, the workers' weight slowing them down. Debris rained down around them, and Sam felt the sting of something sharp slicing through her gear. But she kept moving, adrenaline propelling her forward, until they finally burst out into the open air. Paramedics rushed to take the worker, and Sam collapsed onto the pavement, gasping for breath. The cool air was a sharp contrast to the inferno they had just escaped. Harris approached, her face a mix of relief and pride. "Good work in there," she said. "You kept your head and got the job done." Sam nodded, too exhausted to speak. Emily sat down beside her, patting her shoulder. "Welcome to the real deal," she said with a wry smile. As the fire was brought under control and the team began packing up, Sam found herself standing alone for a moment, staring at the smoldering remains of the warehouse. The weight of what had just happened settled over her, a mix of fear, exhilaration, and pride. She had faced the flames and come out the other side. For the first time, she truly felt like she belonged. The following day, sunlight streamed through the station windows as Sam sat in the break room, nursing a strong cup of coffee. The adrenaline from the warehouse fire still coursed faintly through her veins, but exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. Despite the fatigue, she felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she'd known before. The door creaked open, and Emily stepped in holding a folded piece of paper. "Hey, Sam, got a second?" she asked, her tone light but carrying a hint of excitement. "Sure," Sam said, setting her mug down. "What's up?" Emily handed her the paper, which was an invitation printed in bold letters. It read, "Community Appreciation Event honoring local heroes featuring special guest Sam Daniels." Sam blinked, reading the words twice, to make sure she hadn't imagined them. "Is this real?" she asked, looking up at Emily. Emily grinned. "Oh, it's real. The neighborhood's buzzing about what you did yesterday. And they're throwing an event to thank you and us, of course. But mostly you." Sam's stomach flipped. "I'm not sure I'm ready for something like that. I mean, it was a team effort. Rick, you, everyone. Don't sell yourself short," Emily said, sitting across from her. "You took charge in there. You made decisions. And most importantly, you saved a life. People notice that kind of thing." Sam hesitated, her mind flashing back to the fire, the heat, the chaos. She remembered the worker's terrified face and the moment they pulled him free. It felt surreal to think of herself as a hero. The day of the event arrived quickly. Sam stood outside the community center, her nerves jangling as she adjusted her jacket. The building was decorated with banners and balloons, and a crowd had already gathered, buzzing with anticipation. "You ready?" Harris asked, stepping up beside her. Her steady presence was comforting. Sam exhaled deeply. "As ready as I'll ever be." Inside, The room erupted into applause as Sam walked in. She spotted familiar faces. Mrs. Jenkins from down the street, the kids who always waved at her during her deliveries, and even the family of the worker she'd rescued. Their smiles and cheers felt overwhelming, but also heartwarming. A podium stood at the front of the room, flanked by a large banner that read, "Thank you, Sam." Harris gave her a gentle nudge forward, and Sam approached the microphone. "I don't really know what to say," she began, her voice shaky but sincere. "I didn't expect any of this. Yesterday was one of the hardest days of my life, but also one of the most rewarding. I couldn't have done it without my team, Rick, Emily, Commander Harris, and everyone else. Thank you for believing in me. And thank you to this amazing community for your support. It means more than I can say." The room burst into applause again, and Sam felt a mix of pride and humility. She stepped back, and Harris took the stage to add her own words of encouragement and praise. After the speeches, the atmosphere turned celebratory. Children ran up to Sam with drawings they'd made of the fire truck and the rescue, each one filled with vibrant colors and admiration. One little boy tugged on her sleeve, holding up a crayon drawing of a firefighter. "That's you," he said proudly. "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Sam's throat tightened. She knelt down, accepting the drawing with a smile. "Thank you. That means a lot." Lisa, the mother of the little girl Sam had saved weeks ago, approached her with a warm smile. "You keep inspiring everyone you meet, Sam. My daughter hasn't stopped talking about you. She's been drawing pictures of firefighters all week." Sam's heart swelled. "Thank you, Lisa. That means the world to me." The rest of the evening was filled with laughter, food, and heartfelt conversations. Sam found herself at the center of it all, not just as a hero, but as a part of the community. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of belonging, as though she had found her place. As the event wound down, Harris pulled her aside. "This is just the beginning," she said. "You've got something special, Sam. Don't lose sight of that." Sam nodded, the words resonating deeply. She looked around the room one last time, at the faces filled with gratitude and admiration. This was more than recognition. It was a reminder of why she had taken this path, and she knew, without a doubt, that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The training ground was alive with activity as Sam stood at the edge, adjusting her gloves and taking a deep breath. This was it, the final simulation, the culmination of weeks of grueling effort. Around her, the team moved with practiced precision, their camaraderie evident in their quick jokes and words of encouragement. But today, the stakes felt higher. Harris's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "All right, listen up. This simulation is as close to real as it gets. Your task is to lead your team through a high-risk scenario. It's a multi-story building with heavy smoke and multiple victims. Time is critical. Daniels, you're in charge." Sam nodded, her heart pounding. She'd been preparing for this moment, but the weight of leadership felt daunting. "You've got this," Emily whispered as she adjusted her helmet. Rick gave her a thumbs up from across the group. Their confidence in her was a small but steady anchor. The whistle blew, signaling the start of the exercise. Sam pulled on her mask and led the team into the smoke-filled structure. Visibility was almost non-existent, the air thick and cloying. Her radio crackled as Rick reported, "First floor clear. Moving to the second. Copy that," Sam replied, her voice steady. "Emily, stay with me. Let's check the west corridor." As they moved deeper into the building, the challenges mounted. A partially collapsed ceiling blocked their path, forcing them to crawl under debris. The sound of crackling flames from the simulation's controlled fire heightened the tension. Sam's mind raced as she calculated their next moves. "Victim located," Emily called out, her flashlight illuminating a dummy trapped under a beam. Sam's training kicked in. "Rick, we need you on the west side to stabilize this area." "Emily, start securing the beam for lifting." Minutes felt like hours as they worked to free the dummy. Sweat dripped down Sam's brow as she monitored the team's progress, ensuring everyone stayed safe. Finally, with a coordinated effort, they lifted the beam and secured the victim onto a stretcher. "One down," Sam said into the radio. Moving to the third floor for final check, the climb to the third floor was even more harrowing. A simulated explosion rocked the structure, and Sam instinctively shielded Emily from falling debris. The radio crackled again, this time with Harris's voice. "Daniels, report. Third floor compromised," Sam replied, her voice tight but controlled. "We're checking for victims and preparing for evacuation." They found the second dummy near a window, simulating someone trapped by the fire. The heat from the controlled blaze felt all too real as Sam directed the team to secure the victim and prepare for a ladder extraction. Her breathing was heavy, her body screaming in protest, but her focus never wavered. When the whistle blew to signal the end of the simulation, Sam and her team emerged from the building, sweat-soaked and exhausted, but triumphant. The dummy victims were accounted for, and the structure's collapse had been avoided. The training ground erupted in cheers from the onlookers, fellow trainees, and seasoned firefighters alike. Harris approached, her expression unreadable at first. But then she smiled, a rare and genuine one. "Outstanding work, Daniels," she said. "You kept your team safe, made decisive calls, and completed the mission. That's exactly what we look for in a leader." Sam's chest swelled with pride as Harris's words sank in. The praise from someone she respected so deeply felt like a victory in itself. As the team packed up, Emily threw an arm around Sam's shoulders. "See? Told you you'd crush it. You're a natural. Couldn't have done it without you guys," Sam replied, her voice earnest. "This wasn't just me, it was all of us." Rick chuckled, clapping her on the back. "That's what makes you a good leader. You get it." Later that evening, as the sun set over the training ground, Sam found a quiet moment to reflect. The doubts that had once plagued her felt smaller now, overshadowed by the sense of accomplishment and belonging. She had faced the fire, both literal and figurative, and come out stronger. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe fully in the path she was on. She wasn't just training to be a firefighter. She was becoming one. The day of the graduation ceremony dawned bright and clear, the crisp air carrying with it a palpable sense of excitement. Sam stood in front of the mirror in the locker room, adjusting the collar of her freshly pressed firefighter uniform. The fabric felt heavy but purposeful, the emblem stitched onto the sleeve a reminder of how far she'd come. Emily popped her head into the room, her grin as wide as ever. "You ready, Daniels?" she asked. Sam took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be." The two made their way to the staging area, where the rest of the graduating class waited. Rick stood near the front, his broad smile and easygoing demeanor helping to ease some of Sam's nerves. Harris was there too, her sharp eyes scanning the group, her expression unreadable but proud. As the ceremony began, a hush fell over the crowd. Families and friends filled the chairs set up on the training ground, their faces glowing with pride. The fire chief stepped up to the podium, delivering a speech that spoke of courage, teamwork, and the sacred duty of protecting others. When Sam's name was called, her heart skipped a beat. She stepped forward, her polished boots clicking against the stage. Harris met her halfway, holding out a crisp, folded certificate. "You've earned this," Harris said, her voice low but filled with conviction. "Welcome to the family." Sam took the certificate, her fingers brushing against the smooth paper. She turned to face the crowd, their applause washing over her like a warm wave. In the front row, she spotted Lisa and her son, the young boy's face beaming with admiration as he waved enthusiastically. After the ceremony, the graduates mingled with their families and supporters. Sam found herself surrounded by her team, Emily, Rick, and even a few of the seasoned firefighters she'd trained alongside. They clinked water bottles in a makeshift toast, laughter and congratulations filling the air. Lisa approached her with her son in tow. The boy held a drawing in his hands, another crayon masterpiece of Sam in her firefighter gear, standing heroically in front of a blazing building. "We're so proud of you," Lisa said, her voice warm with sincerity. "You've inspired not just us, but the entire community." Sam knelt down to the boy's level, taking the drawing with a smile. "Thanks, buddy. This means a lot." The boy grinned. "When I grow up, I'm gonna be just like you." Sam chuckled, her chest tightening with emotion. "You'll be even better," she said, ruffling his hair. Harris appeared beside her, holding out a small, shiny badge. "Almost forgot this," she said. Sam's breath caught as she took the badge, the weight of it settling into her palm. It was real now. She was a firefighter. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden light over the station, Sam found a moment of solitude. She stood near one of the engines, running her fingers over the badge now pinned to her chest. The journey had been long and challenging, but every step had led her here. For the first time, she felt not just ready, but eager to face whatever lay ahead. She wasn't just part of a team. She was part of a legacy, and she knew her story was only just beginning. Did this story touch your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Golden Stories so you never miss one of the heartfelt tales we create with so much care. Each video takes days of dedication, and your support is what inspires us to keep going. Thank you for being part of this incredible journey. See you in the next video.